Okay, let's get started again. All right. My observation through that long and sometimes tedious career that I recounted for you is that there are 4 fundamental areas where there are real difficulties in IT. You're going to run into all of these as you actually work out in industry. Human factors, process factors, knowledge. I don't like that. Someone have a nice word that manages to encompass data, information, and knowledge without the specific implications of any of those 3. I keep going back and forth between those 3 because each one I choose seems to exclude some of the stuff I'm talking about. And I don't want to say knowledge, information, and data factors. Maybe. Anyway, we'll get to that. And technology factors. Software engineering is fundamentally a human activity. It is fundamentally a social activity. Even if you're a lone programmer coding what you think is the ultimate app, you're still interacting in your mind with your intended end user, even if that end user is just yourself. But boy, once you get more than one programmer involved or one person involved, sociological factors dominate. So let's talk about this. Human factors, at least four key issues that I see here. One is the lack of truly qualified IT workers out in the field. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. One is the fact that software engineering becomes an expression of human failings and human passions as well. I mean, good things about humans, but it will expose, because of the pressures and the issues involved, it will expose all human failings. Third is that I came to the realization some years ago that a lot of interactions within organizations over IT projects can be better explained by game theory than by simple management techniques. And the fourth is that a lot of software development is driven by various forms of metrics and reporting, and that these most often have a distorting and or counterproductive effect. Okay. When I took 404 back as an undergraduate 40 years ago, the 2 professors teaching, one was Tad Norman, who was former chairman of the department. The other one, I can't remember what his name was. He actually worked in industry, sort of like me. Worked in industry, was taking a year sabbatical and teaching for a year. And as I have up there, one day in class he said, if you knew which ones to pick, you could actually, the way he put it is, you could take half of all people working in data processing, take them outside and shoot them. And not only would no deadlines be missed, but a lot of them would be advanced. The fact that I remember that, I mean, I was like, whoa, that's kind of cold. And then I graduated. If anything, he was an optimist. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of brilliant, talented, dedicated, well-qualified people working in IT. And there's a lot of people in IT who have no business being there. And it is very hard for a standard HR department to tell the difference between the two. Again, I have experience building engineering teams and screening applicants. And boy, we'll talk in a second about that. But now, why this is important is because pretty much all the studies on software project success and failure over the past half century have shown that people are the dominant factor. Barry Boehm, who did some of the pioneering work on project failure and analysis of project failure and project success, said that the quality of the people involved was 4 times greater than the number 2 factor. For a project to succeed, you need the best people. Now, what are those differences like? As it says up there, there have been a variety of studies that controlling for education, background, and experience have shown differences in performance in terms of, say, number of lines of bug-free code generated towards a particular solution to be anywhere from 3-to-1 to 28-to-1. And I personally have known and worked with people like this. One of the best software engineers I ever worked with was a young man who had a GED, had none of the standard qualifications, but one of our other programmers that told me, he said, Bruce, I've worked with this guy, he's brilliant, hire him. So we brought him in, put him through our interview process. He was the youngest engineer on the team, this was at Pages, and yet he was the one who I basically made my assistant architect. I was chief architect. And for the last year and a half after we shipped, I pretty much turned all the architecture stuff over to him. He was truly gifted. I mean, this is a kid who was writing in high school with no training, was writing object-oriented operating systems on his own. But the demand outstrips the supply. By the way, you'll see, and like I said, these will be posted. One of the things, when you go to the course webpage, one of your readings, along with Mythical Man Month, is I've got links to a set of blog posts of mine. These are all like 5-minute reads, if that long. But they cover a number of topics. I'm linking to them here in the slides, and they're actually linked if I go to, hang on here. Go to the web page, go to materials, go to readings. You'll see all these things labeled Webster. These are all blog posts of mine. A few are magazine articles. So for example, this one is an article I wrote for Byte Magazine back in 1996, talking about this very issue. You see, by the way, this is the sacrifice I made for you people. I had a beard for 29 years. I shaved it off last night. Anyway. That's okay. I'm happy to be here. Anyway. I actually did go in and ask about a beard card. And talk to the faculty, what's his title? Faculty Services. Has an office right across the hall from President Worthing. He laid it out, and I said, okay, I'm shaving. Okay, let's go back to our slideshow here. Come on, there we go. The problem is, now, when you read The Real Software Crisis, one of the analogies I use is music talent. Have any of you ever dated or know a music major? I dated one my freshman year. And pretty much my conclusion this was the toughest major at BYU. If you've ever known a music major, and actually I have a daughter-in-law who has a master's in music performance. So I got to watch her go through her bachelor's and her master's. They require so much of you, you have to do so many things, and you have to be talented. Trust me, I don't think you can graduate as a music major unless you've got some inherent music talent. We accept the idea of talent in music, in mathematics, in art, in athletics, but we tend to sort of resist the concept of talent in software engineering. And I've been at this for 40 years, and it's very clear. There are talents. It's not one talent, and it's not you have it or don't have it. When you read, well, I've got another one here that we'll talk about in a second. read this article, Tempest. It's more like a 3D6 roll. So you have sort of a normal curve there, and it's a set of talents. I've known people talented in different ways. But it's real. And I've also known people who are outstanding software engineers whose talent is maybe workmanlike. But you know what? They know their stuff cold. It's why the point of the second article here, Tempest. Because what I came to about 12 years after writing this one is that there are really 5 factors. Talent, education, professionalism, experience, and skills. Roughly in that order. Talent is an inherent talent. Education is knowing what you're doing. And that's why you're here getting a CS degree. Again, and I think I may have already said this, but when I was a undergrad, the common wisdom was, well, you know, computer science majors, they really don't learn anything that applies in the real world. And I went to General Dynamics, immediately found application for what I knew about things like linked lists and queuing theory and stuff like that. And realized a lot of the programmers around me didn't really understand that stuff, and I was seeing solutions that it's like, well, you know, you could really rewrite this and do this, and you'd have this. Professionalism, by professionalism, I'm referring to because you have actually in peopleware, they'll talk negatively about professionalism, but they'll talk about something quite different from what I'm talking about. In my case, professionalism means show up and do your job. Don't be a prima donna. When we were starting Pages, I was trying to build the engineering team, and there was a local software company that had been quite successful in San Diego called Silicon Beach Software. They'd done some of the early applications and games for Macintosh. And I interviewed 2 guys from there who'd been involved in some of their projects, thinking, you know, they're local, they're good, they've got some word processing experience, you know, writing stuff should be good. And in the course of interviewing, they came in together for an interview. They wanted to be interviewed together. And when I started asking about, you know, salary expectations and so on, not only did they have fairly steep salary expectations, but they were talking about signing bonuses and company cars. It's like, you know, for a startup, you don't have venture funds. It's like, sorry guys, but no. I interviewed personally, and back during that period after Pages folded until I joined OSG, that year when I was doing some consulting, I interviewed with a software company up in Corvallis. And what I quickly found was that they had a very bright young programmer on staff who was basically holding the rest of the staff hostage. If things didn't go his way, he would throw temper tantrums. And the company considered him too valuable to replace. And it was clear, I mean, basically I had a number of people interview me, and in the course of speaking, it became clear to me that this was a problem there. And one of my final interviews was sort of a group interview, and I made this point about professionalism. And I could see this young prima donna was very unhappy about that. They didn't make me an offer, but that was fine. I probably would have accepted one. So professionalism is not, and it doesn't mean not having fun. My children grew up while I was at Pages. They still have fond memories of all the various Nerf guns and toys and artifacts that were in all the engineers' offices, including mine. I do have an animatronic chimp cat in my office at home. I also have a steampunk skull. But that's different. That's not what I mean by professionalism. It's not your haircut, it's not your beard, it's that you show up and do your work. That you pull your weight. You don't hold other people hostage. Experience is simply what you've been through. And sometimes that's essential, sometimes it's not. And skills are sort of the least valuable, but they're the ones that hiring companies want. Well, do you have certifications in X, Y, and Z? You know, do you have an A+ certification? Do you have a Java certification? Python certification? when I was building the team at Pages, only one of the programmers I hired had any prior experience in NextStep because it was brand new. The machine had just barely shipped the year before. And it was a niche machine. Some had word processing experience. Again, almost no one had. And by the way, the native programming environment for NextStep was Objective-C, which is still my all-time favorite programming language. But none of them had experience in Objective-C. That didn't bother me. These were bright. This is probably the single best group of engineers I've ever worked with. And I knew they could learn the stuff they needed to learn, and we were in this for the long haul. This wasn't a, get this app built in the next 90 days. It took us a year and a half to close on venture funding. I mentioned it's hard to screen and hire, and it's hard to retain your best programmers. Dead Sea effect is a phrase I coined several years ago, and it actually got picked up, and I've seen it cited in a number of places. It's a syndrome I often see in organizational IT departments where new hires come in and the good ones leave. The good ones recognize after some period of time, no, this isn't the place I want to work. There are problems with management, they see problems on the horizon. But those who aren't good don't necessarily have prospects elsewhere. And so they stay. And what you have is, over time, the IT department, the quality of the workforce just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's harder and harder to hire good people because when they come in and start interviewing, they realize, this isn't where I want to work. I first saw this 20 years ago when I was doing consulting at Fannie Mae in Washington, D.C. I kept saying Fannie Mae had, OSG was there with about 20 consultants, 25 consultants. I was in charge of them to help them with a number of object technology projects. But they had in-house IT people as well. And over 2 years, I kept seeing all their best in-house IT people leave. And they'd be quite frank. It's kind of like, I'm going somewhere else. I don't have the prospects here at Fannie that I think I should have. And finally, and this is an article that Ruby Raley and I published in Cutter Consortium Journal a few years ago. There's a tendency of organizations to treat engineers as interchangeable parts. And DeMarco and Lister talk about this in PeopleWare. It's kind of like, oh, well, so what? We lost a program. We can get a new one. There are few things more devastating to a software project, particularly a relatively small team, than lose one of your programmers. And at Pages, this was a constant argument I was having with our CFO. Our CFO kept trying, and bless his heart, it's his job, but kept trying to find ways to cut costs. Well, maybe we were going to stop stocking the kitchen with, drinks and sodas. And I'd say, John, his name was John Curry, I said, John, you cannot spend enough on drinks and sodas to make up how much money we will lose if one of these programmers leaves. You can't. And I knew someone, I had learned that lesson from someone who had another technology company of his own in San Diego. I had a discussion with him, and he said, I always buy my software engineers the latest and greatest development systems. They get new computers every year. If there are any tools they want, they have them, because whatever I spend on new computers and on software tools is a tiny fraction of what we will lose if our product ships just 1 month late. So, you're going to see the personnel issue. Oh, and Joseph wanted me to put this in here. You need to be aware that the demand for software engineers is constrained by external forces. This is when I graduated from BYU. This is when I came back to Provo. You can see why they said, hey, can you come in and teach? The enrollment here had gone from 120 to 1,000. You had to apply and be accepted to be a CS major. Whereas when I was undergraduate, we were out beating the bushes. Hey, come join the CS program. There was this peak here, which was largely caused, I mentioned after I moved to Soquel that there was a PC collapse. Well, it was largely caused because through here you had this big bubble in the PC industry. These were the initial glory days of Apple and Microsoft, and then remember the companies, and people were going into computer science because they saw it as the next law or the next medicine. I can go in, I can be rich, I can be the next Steve Jobs. And then the market itself collapsed, so you see this demand, and it drops off, and then what you have here around 97 is the dot-com boom. And when that happened, I said, I've seen this before. This isn't going to end well. And I saw venture-funded startups. Remember I mentioned Pages, we raised $7 million in venture funding. We lived off that for 3.5 years. We finally closed on it after a year and a half and lived on it for another 3.5 years, with the company getting up to 30 people. I was seeing dot-com startups that were burning through $7 million a month that had no business plan. It's kind of like, well, we just need to get eyeballs. It's like the Gnome Underpants theory of profits. Eyeballs, question mark, profit. And I was telling anyone who listened to me, this is going to end so badly, and it did. NASDAQ peaked in March of 2000, and then started to crash. This is what caused the recession of 2000, 2001. NASDAQ would not get back to its all-time high there until late last year. It took until, I think, November or December of last year before it finally, 15 years later, before it recovered to the peak it had there. Now, this only goes through 2010. You see this, and it's starting to go up. It's going up again. Computer science enrollment, computer science graduates are going up again. I talked to the chairman of the department. He says they're planning for a 20% increase in students. We'll see if that's meeting a real demand. And as I said, the real demand is out there. But part of the problem is that when stuff like this happens, just as companies have a very hard time distinguishing between good and bad IT workers when they hire, they have a very hard time distinguishing between good and bad IT workers when they lay people off. So you have to understand you're in a volatile industry. Now, there are jobs out there that are pretty stable, but in my experience, most people aren't looking for stable jobs. You want the next. I changed jobs 4 times in my first 4 years out of college. Now, part of that was because inflation was running at double digits. This is the end of Jimmy Carter era, so you're looking at 12 to 15% a year inflation. I was having to change jobs just to keep jacking my salary down. 12 to 15% a year inflation. I was having to change jobs just to keep my salary up with inflation. But I graduated in '78, and by 1980 I was at, I guess I should say first 3 years. I graduated in '78, and by 1981 I was at Modern Labs, which is my 4th job in college.
Are those numbers from BYU or?
Oh no, that's nationwide up there. Okay. Again, when you read, particularly when you read Peopleware, the theme there is that software engineering, project management is very sociological. And part of the problem is that the key groups involved often talk right past each other. Now, within an organization, you can apply this for commercial things as well, but basically you've got the developers, us. You've got the management / marketing / sales types, the ones who are underwriting it and who are trying to make money off of what we're developing. And then you've got the end users or the customers, or the actual consumers. And it struck me several years ago, how many of you have seen A Beautiful Mind? Okay, a lot of you. Okay, the Nash equilibrium is an attempt to solve this problem with competing demands. When I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually very applicable to software development. Because you have the same thing, you have different contradictory demands and you have different expectations. You know, my little quip here is that the developers think they're playing Overwatch, the marketing types think they're playing poker, and the end users just want to get their checkbooks balanced. The mindsets, it's not just, oh, I want to make 10%, they want to make 20%. The actual goals and mindsets can be radically different. And part of your challenge when you get out in your field is learning how to talk to both end users and to the, what is often called in engineering circles, the marketing slime. I have had shouting matches. I remember one particular with Brent Schulman, who love him to pieces, but he was our sales and marketing guy at Pages. He came back from a visit to a customer, a big law firm, who was looking at adopting it and said, oh, by the way, I told them we could put in X, Y, and Z. And I said, Brad, we can't. We can't put those in. There's no way in hell we can put those in. Those are impossible. Those are impossible features. What are you doing? He says, well, you know, you guys just have to work harder. I said, we're working 90 hours a week. What do you mean we work harder? I have had those types just like that. Hear my voice get high, my eyes get wild. Of course, this is after years of 90-hour weeks and trying to get the product out the door and so on. But one of the most important things is learning that you are playing an entirely different game, that what matters to them is something quite different from what matters to you. And unless you understand that, and of course the end users, I've literally heard this. We want it to work just like the old system, but better. It's like, well, no, to get these new features, you have to accept this new user interface. No, we want the user interface to look just like the old system. Believe it or not, Pages, our founders were this world-famous typographer, Mike Parker, and this graphic designer, Mick Spindler. And it was this design-oriented desktop publishing system where you had design models you could apply, and when you laid it out one way, you could switch design models, and it would perfectly lay it out according to the new design model. You know what the two big requests were when we first shipped? We want WordPerfect key bindings, and we want Emacs key bindings. You know what we did? We put in WordPerfect key bindings, and we put in Emacs key bindings. The customers wanted what they wanted, and we had to respond to it. They also wanted, this is one where we're supposed to have great control over the design to ensure that it's following good design principles. And of course their comment was, no, we want to fiddle with stuff. We want a ruler bar. We want to be able to change this stuff. So that also went into version either 1.1 or 1.2. Lies, Dan Blind, and metrics. Project metrics are sort of the holy grail, and they're almost always wrong. They're almost always wrong because they have to be effective, they have to be objective, automated, and useful, and they can predict project completion or success. I have dealt with lots and lots of project metrics. I haven't found any that meet that. In fact, the only project metric which I've actually found useful when we were going to ship version 1.0 of Pages, and this didn't come from me, it came from Jim Hammerly, who was our VP of Engineering and had come out of Xerox. And he very simply plotted on the whiteboard, day by day, how many open defects we had, well basically, how many new defects we had found and how many defects we had closed that day. If that ratio was less than 1, then it meant we were on a glide path to completion. We were finding fewer defects than we were fixing. As long as it was above 1, the project was unstable. Let me tell you, in my 20 years of reviewing failing or failed IT projects, that is the single best predictor of project failure. And what I see are projects that never stabilize. fact, the pattern you see, and we'll talk about this in a future class, the classic pattern. You have a deadline date, and you're approaching it, and all hands on deck, everyone's working, and about 3 weeks before you're supposed to deliver a ship, it's like, oh, we're going to have to delay. There's a scramble, and then you estimate and say, well, it's going to take another 6 months. And everyone starts working. 6 months go by, and you're 3 weeks from shipping, and suddenly say, oh, we're not going to make it. And there's a reschedule, and it's another 6 months. I can't tell you how many projects where that has literally been the cycle, right down to the 6 months. People seem to like that 6 month slip. Sometimes it's less than that, sometimes it's more, but at 6 months just seems like, okay, we can accept 6 months, it's half a year, we can do this. I have a case that I'm working on right now for a failed SAP installation, where that's exactly what happened. They kept slipping in 6 month chunks. In fact, at one point, the developer and the customer got together and actually predicted a 10-month slip. And then the developer came back because they were on a fixed price contract and said, no, we're going to do 6 months. And then when they got to the 6 months, they slipped down to what had been the original 10-month target. And when it got to the 10 months, they still weren't ready to ship. There are a number of estimation models, things like Kokomo 2, Capers-Jones has done a tremendous amount of work trying to estimate from the information you have, how long is this project going to take? Now, I had to use one of these in a case I was in. In fact, it was Kokomo 2. It was a case where the other side was trying to establish the value of a given piece of software they claimed had been misappropriated. And they were doing it by saying it was 9,000 lines of code. According to Kokomo 2, this would have taken this long to develop with this many people, and that would have cost this much, therefore this is what the software is worth. And I took their Kokomo 2 model and showed by simply varying, because of choices where they were free to choose, not choices that were mandated by actual information, but where they made arbitrary choices, I could get a 2,500 to 1 variance in an estimate of how long the project would take. This, I have said this any number of times. This sadly is much truer than you think. First 90% of the project, the development effort takes 90% of the schedule. The remaining 10% takes the other 90% of the schedule. There is a simple reason for this. We delay the hard stuff. You want progress when you're working on a project, so what do? Well, I can do the user. I see some laughing over here. I can do the user interface, and I can make this work, and I can make this work. And basically, you're cherry picking. You're getting all the easy stuff. And what often happens is you get to the end, and all that's left are all the hard problems. And because you left them to the end, you sometimes find you have, say, half a dozen hard problems, and the solution you want for one blocks the solution for another one, and you realize you're going to have to roll back and roll back and roll back. My mental image is taking a bunch of flour, mixing some walnuts, and putting in a sifter. Flour goes through pretty fine, but pretty soon you've got a dozen walnuts in there, and nothing's happening. You can sift all you want, and the walnuts stay there. You got to take them out and smash them into very fine powder to get it there. One of my rules of thumb is you always need to you need to identify and handle the hardest stuff first. And that's not how people work, because that slows down your progress. You don't have great status reports. You want the easy win. And again, I see project after project found right now. Thermocline of truth. It's also a phrase I came up with. Who knows what a thermocline is? Anyone? Anyone? Dealer? Come on. Someone must know what a thermocline is. I learned this in high school. Okay, how many of you have ever swum in a lake? Okay, what's the water like about a foot below the surface? It's cold. That's the thermocline. You see it both in the ocean, it's much deeper. But what you get in bodies of water is you get this warm layer, and you get down a certain ways, and suddenly the temperature drops very sharply. I learned about this because I had an oceanography class in summer before 9th grade. What I found is that in projects, in fact, I think I just put it through here and bring it close. Don't do that. There's the thermocline. See if I can enlarge that. Nope, that doesn't help. It just goes to the source of it. But you can see there, that's the temperature is greater as you go to the right. So you have very warm water, and then suddenly it gets very cold as the depth increases. Well, in projects, you have a thermocline of truth, which is the level of management at which people know what's really going on. Usually, and when I do project reviews, the first thing I do is I go and interview all the people in the trenches. Say, well, how do you think the project's going? This is not for legal cases, this is for, come in and look for a project kind of case. The people in our trenches are like, oh, we're so sunk, this is so bad. We're not doing this, we're not doing this. I'll start to work up my way to the management change. I usually find a level at which people say, well, yeah, we're doing pretty well. Only good news flows upward. No one wants to report bad news. One of the great examples of this, when I was at Fannie Mae, I got dragged into their Y2K remediation effort. And I was working with Carol Teasy, who's probably the best. I mean, technically, I was a parallel report. She was a vice president of Fannie Mae. I was head of all the OSG consultants there, but I learned so much from Carol. I would work for her again in a heartbeat. She was brilliant, she was honest, she was ruthless. But she was put in charge of Y2K for all of Fannie Mae. And they were supposed to have all their remediation done by the end of 1998. And there were like 20-odd groups or divisions that were reporting, and they were using green, yellow, red for their status. And everyone was reporting green, reporting green, reporting green. And then they had a meeting about 3 weeks before the end of the year. We're at that magic 3-week period. And all of a sudden, across the board, they all go yellow and red instead of green. And Carol looks at them. These are senior managers at Fannie Mae who are making a lot of money. She looks at all of them and says, so tell me what you know now that you didn't know last week. Usually what you have with the thermocline there is that it starts off relatively low, and as the project goes along, it rises up. And it doesn't get to upper management until the magical 3 weeks before shipping. And that's why you have the reset and then everything else happens. I've seen cases where you've had deliberate underestimation to get projects approved. You have mismanagement of expectations. What's the engineer's credo? Under-promise and over-deliver. Under-promise and over-deliver. Let me strongly recommend that to you. Engineers are by nature optimistic. Oh yeah, that's a simple matter of programming. SMOP. Again, back at Fannie Mae, this isn't Y2K. We had this big object technology initiative. We had a brilliant architect, Jeff Greenfield, who's at Microsoft now, who is building this object framework for Fannie Mae. And it was supposed to be done by a specific date. And it was becoming clear it wasn't going to get done. And so Carol went to Jack, and I was in on this because I was actually over Jack and over all the OSG people, and said, okay, give me your best estimate as to when you think you'll have this done. And Jack said, I think we'll have it done in 3 weeks. And Carol came to me right afterwards and said, is he an idiot? He said, I just gave him a get out of jail free card. He could have said 6 months, and I would have given him 6 months. He said, I know he's not going to make it in 3 weeks, and he didn't. You'll see in Mythical Man Month, he quotes someone else as saying, "Take no small slips." If you're given the opportunity to slip a project, take what you think it's going to take and double it. Because if you don't make, when you get that chance to reschedule, if you don't make the new schedule, it's going to look worse. There's a whole book on how managing to metrics almost always results in project distortion. We'll get to that. Where are we at? Oh man, okay. I will limit my back-in-the-day storytelling. Process factors. Again, I've been around 40 years. I've watched the process wars. This methodology versus that methodology. It's like the thin client versus thick client wars, where it's just a pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth. You're on a terminal, you're on a workstation, you're hooked up to a mainframe, you're on a personal computer, you have thin client devices, you're back onto everything on your mobile device, you're now in the cloud. You have the same thing with methodologies. You have issues with quality, issues with cycles, and issues with organizational change. Let's talk about, there are fundamentally two types of methodologies. There's the fast, light, iterative methodology, usually these days called Agile or XP, but actually dates back before either of them. And then there's the big ponderous waterfall, which actually has iteration in it as well, which is like, well, you do analysis, and then you do specifications, then you do development, then you do test, and then you do production. The truth is, both of them have problems. And the success usually isn't based on the methodology, it's usually based on the quality of the people. Even the proponents of Agile have come back and said, well, really Agile works best if you have a small number of people and maybe a 9-month project and doing this. Well, there are software development projects that can't be done in 9 months with a small number of people. In fact, that's one of the discussions you'll see in the command line. There are software development projects that may take a couple hundred people, it may take several years. Agile doesn't lend itself well to that, but waterfall has its own problems. Quality. This is a pet peeve of mine. At Pages, closing our venture funding, hired our permanent CEO, Larry Spellhog, good man, had solid experience coming out of Xerox with their Ventura publishing package. I wanted to hire a director of quality. He said, well, can't we just hire some college students to test in a couple of weeks when we're all done? And I was ready to put my face through a wall. It's like, no, that doesn't work. That's not how quality works. As I point out here, it's often seen as, oh, we're going to test it for a few weeks before we ship. And part of the problem is that it is pervasive in the industry that quality engineers are second-class citizens. I architect, you code, he, she, it tests. That's how you conjugate the verb program. The architects have the exalted position, then you have the programmers, and then there's those testing types, and just people who couldn't cut it. But when I was at Pages, I insisted we have a director of quality. I insisted we hire actual QA engineers. And it saved our butts any number of times. Quality, and this is one of the reasons why you may end up reading Perfect Software and other illusions about testing, and Jerry Weinberg later in the semester. The more you focus on quality and you early and pervasive, the more likely it is you'll ship on time. Because, and again, remember, I've reviewed, all things considered, maybe 150 failed IT projects. And you know what they all look like? They get into testing and they never get out of testing. The project never stabilizes, and it's usually because they have core problems that could have been found by early testing, and they keep having to loop back and rewrite stuff, loop back and redo stuff. Okay, this is an interesting one. I credit a seminar from, who was it? I want to say the Meta Group for this concept. What are businesses typically looking at? If I'm a CEO, I'm trying to plan for my business. It's like, what are my year-over-year returns? You know, what's my profit margin? Where can I cut expenses? The year-over-year is particularly interesting. In fact, the reason you don't hear, I mean, how many of you know what Fannie Mae does? See, 20 years ago, you'd all know about Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was set up by the U.S. government as a quasi-private, publicly traded organization, basically to buy up mortgages from banks, so the banks would have more money to turn around and issue more mortgages. Then they would manage those mortgages, and then Fannie Mae would get money by bundling those mortgages into mortgage-backed securities and selling those on the securities market. So their money would come in from the mortgage-backed securities, and it would go out to the banks. Well, Fannie Mae was highly profitable. When I was there in the mid-90s, their profit was, after taxes, was $1 million per employee. They had 3,000 employees, and their profit was, what, $3 billion? And their stock price kept going up. But to keep their stock price going up, they were cooking the books, because they wanted double-digit growth in revenues year over year. So from first quarter of 1995 to first quarter of 1996, they wanted 10% growth, right? At least 10%, but not too much above 10%. Well, they started lying on their accounting systems to achieve that. They started moving funds between quarters and doing various things, and they got caught in it. And that caused problems. And then they contributed to the 2007 crash, because they kept buying up mortgages that were based on liar loans. They were based on people who really weren't qualified to have those mortgages. They were subprime loans. And when you had the subprime collapse in 2007, Fannie was pretty much killed. So you've got the business objectives and funding. You have market opportunities. I have to get something out by such and such a date in order to score on this. How many of you play games? Me too. I mean, I was a game designer from many years ago. How many of you have bought a game that was forced out in November or December in order to make the Christmas rush that was buggy as heck when it came out? I left a scathing review on Amazon for Civ 4 for exactly that reason. And I love the Civilization games, but they pushed it out precisely to get the Christmas sales, and it was not ready for prime time. And it took them some time to recover from the reputation for that. IT development time. I have switched over to, there we go. Yes.
So I've seen a lot of links to readings. Are
Yes.
those readings we're going to go back throughout the semester, or are we expected to read all those?
Read the links to readings. Like I said, these are mostly things I've written on one of my blogs, which is brucefwebster.com. Most of them are like 2 to 5 minute readings. I mean, you could probably read everything that's in the readings list that has my name by it in less than an hour, all told. Yes, there's stuff we'll go into more detail. I've referred to some of it here, and there are things we'll go back. But again, what I'm trying to do is to expose you to as much of this stuff now. And I do appreciate you sitting through the long discourse on my career. But you see now, I can refer back to say, well, when I was at Pages, when I was at OG, when I was at Object Systems Group, and so on. I want you to have a context of what I'm talking about when I do that. Now, you asked a very good question, and now that we have the camera back on, ask it again.
Well, I was just wondering, because you said about the long process you had to find the team, and I was wondering, what did you find, or how did you find the good people?
Single best predictor is the opinion of someone you trust. And that's a real problem, because it's like, oh, what if I don't have someone to rely upon? I mentioned Peter Lenz, this young man, who's the best software engineer I've ever hired. I turned over architecture to him. Well, I had previously hired Rick Gessner. And Rick Gessner was the one who said, hey, there's this guy back in Arizona I work with, you really need to hire him. And we brought him in. Now, our hiring process at Pages, and this is not unlike something you'll see, our hiring process was that we would bring, well, I had roughly a rule of 10. And frankly, 10 may be too high a number, but it's a nice round number. Which is that for every 10 resumes I looked at, I found one where I actually wanted to call the person. And for about every 10 people I called, I had one who I wanted to bring in for an interview. And probably for about every 5 we brought in for an interview, we had one we hired. Our hiring process was that every single then extant member of the engineering team would interview the person. And I didn't give them any guidelines other than try and figure out if this guy fits in the team. And they all had quite different approaches. And after everyone on the team had interviewed this person, we'd have a meeting together and I'd say, what do you think? And unless we were all unified, saying, yes, we want to hire this person, we wouldn't hire him. You know, people would have a chance to try and argue and change it. Well, you know, I really think you can contribute and so on. But even with that, I mean, here are some of the, and this is one of the things I'm proudest of. Basically, I spent 1.5 years building the team. Part of it is, of course, we're still trying to raise funds. You don't want to bring on people too soon, which is often a problem. Part of it is just it's a long process. Not a single engineer I hired left voluntarily in a 5-year arc. No one quit just to go somewhere else. There was one person I hired very early on when I was doing the hiring. He also worked for this local software company, Silicon Valley. I knew him, not close, but you know, I knew him generally because we hung around in some of the same geek groups there in San Diego. He had what I thought should be some good experience, and I gave him, this is very early days, and I gave him a problem and said, you know, here's what we're looking at. We have this design-oriented desktop publishing. I really need to focus. I can't even remember offhand now what the problem was, but it was something that, in my opinion, he was going to work on for the next 2 months. It was a profound problem. And he came back about a day or two later and said, well, here's what I came up with. And I looked at it, and of course, it was totally inadequate. I said, no, Don, this is what and I went through that 3 or 4 times with him. I kept trying to explain what I needed him to do, and he kept coming back with me with, in essence, a nothing burger as far as his results. Then he started coming in late on Monday and leaving early on Friday and so on. And after about 2 months, I called him and said, I'm sorry, Don, it's just not working out. He was really hacked because he had lost some stock options in leaving Silicon Beach software to come to us. But he did have a nice new Lotus convertible, which he let me drive before I fired him. Anyway, and we had one other developer who was extremely bright, but frankly had some real emotional issues. And he was sort of the burr under the saddle, and I hung on to him because there was a lot of stuff he was contributing, but he was just tearing the team up. And one of the things, once we closed on venture funding, before venture funding, I was being both manager and the chief architect. I don't recommend that. I would recommend in your projects that you have one person as a manager, one person as a chief architect. I really do. Having done it for almost 1.5 years, the roles don't mesh well. Anyway, but we hired Jim Hammerling, who I mentioned. It was Jim who finally, after about 6 months, just fired him because he was sort of going off the deep end. This employee, not Jim. And we had 2 engineers we lost 4 years into the project because we had a reduction in force. But we did not have a single programmer who quit except we went somewhere else. And I consider that because of the care we took in hiring them in the first place and the things I fought for, which will be part of our discussion, though not today, to keep the developers happy. I already mentioned John Curry. I had a lot of headbutting with John Curry, and again, I learned a lot from John, but it's like, John, you know, trust me, these guys are working as hard as they can. They're not kids. Anyway, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time, Machiavelli, The Prince. And I think I think DeMarco and Lister quoted Peopleware as well. You will not appreciate how true this is until you get it in an organizational setting where something new is proposed. Because this is what you face. As he says, the person proposing to change has as enemies all those who like the old way of doing things, but only gets lukewarm support at best from those who stand to profit. One of the biggest icebergs on which corporate projects fail is resistance. Whether it's from the in-house information systems people, whether it's from people on a management level, or whether it's from end users. I threw this quote in here because it's talking specifically about architecture here. But boy, it's so true on failed projects. In architecting a new system, all the serious mistakes are made in the first day. The idea there is that when you first start out, there are unexamined assumptions or decisions, or both, that are made that lay the groundwork for failure. You need to very carefully consider what you're doing and why you're doing it and what the implications are. And Meyer and Recton also have this quote, which is so important. For a new system, you need to know who benefits, who pays, who provides, and who loses. And if you can't answer all four of those questions, as it says, in a self-consistent way, then you're underestimating the potential for failure. Now, knowledge factors. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Information security. Okay. This is a big issue. This is a big issue right now. And part of the problem, I mean, one of my favorite pet peeves is the Internet of Things. Because you have this increasing number of internet-connected devices in the home that have pretty lousy security, if any security at all. So you have people who can sniff them out, track them down, and hey presto, they control your refrigerator. Or your webcam, you know, or I just saw a set of photos on Facebook that someone posted. The person who originated photos said, I noticed that one of my neighbors had installed an unprotected wireless printer. And he printed out a sheet and said, hello, I am your printer. I have become self-aware. And had it print out. And the next day, the printer is out sitting by the trash. And the guy says, I got a new printer, which strikes me as really cheesy. You should have just turned it back. But the problem is that software security design is sorely neglected. And it really needs to be designed from the very start. And with all the security design, humans are still the weakest link. Anyone who studied system security knows that social engineering is the simplest thing to do. I posted on Facebook recently a great article with two guys who simply put on reflective vests and went wandering through all different places in the zoo where they weren't supposed to be. Put on a hard hat and a clipboard and something that looks like a uniform, and you can go about anywhere. People just assume you know what you're doing. We have the famous John Podesta emails from WikiLeaks. He succumbed to a phishing attack. You know, don't click on those links that you get in emails. And it's a bit scary how sophisticated they get. The other day, I had an email, my insurance is through USAA. And I got a legitimate email from USAA talking about something. And within like 5 minutes, I got another email that was labeled from USAA that said, here are your documents. Now, USAA does actually produce documents, usually have to go look at them and ask for them. I thought, wait a second. And I went, of course, classic thing is, look at the return email address or the actual URL of the link they want you to click on. It wasn't USAA. It was a very sophisticated phishing attack. The demolished firm. Now this is an area, this may seem a bit obscure or whatever, but if you're working in IT in any sort of corporate or organizational setting, I guarantee that at some point you're going to run across this. When a lawsuit starts, or even there is a possibility of a lawsuit, there is a legal obligation to preserve any relevant documents because they may be required to be produced in what's called discovery. Discovery is what restores my faith in humanity. Because I work on these cases where there's these failed projects, and I get emails from the other side where you have literally this email from a consulting firm on the other side who's being sued for failure to deliver the project, and the engineer is saying, I can't believe we're charging the customer $100,000 and delivering this garbage to them. And that was an actual internal email between the engineers on the other side. It restores my faith in humanity because you think, it actually would have been pretty easy for the firm to have deleted those. I am amazed at the honor and integrity of so many organizations that actually preserve and produce documents that are damaging to their side in litigation. But the problem is they have to be preserved and produced. There was a famous case about 20 years ago, American Home Pharmacy. They were one of the distributors of the Fen-Phen weight loss drug. And they were ordered by the court to preserve any relevant documents. And the system administrators apparently didn't get the word because they were rotating through backup tapes. And they overwrote some of the backup tapes of documents such as emails and memos that should have been preserved. And the judge basically issued an order of spoliation, which meant that the jury should assume that American Home Products intended to deliberately destroy that evidence, not accidentally. Now the problem is that businesses now, my gosh, the old days, 20 years ago when I started this thing, I would get like a dozen boxes of hard copy documents for cases I was working on. Now I've worked on cases where there's over 1 million separate documents. They're all online and searchable. The amount of information that an organization produces that has to be preserved is staggering. Intellectual property. Somewhere it became clear, far outside of the usual artistic endeavors, that intellectual property was worth something. You're going to run across this a number of ways, including right off the bat. Let's say you have a utility library that you like to use. And you happen to use this in working for a project with your current employer. Does your employer now have rights to use that? Do they now own it? Do you have rights to go to another company, particularly a competitor of your current employer, and reuse those same libraries which you designed and you own with the other one? I have dealt with cases like this. There are some really, really sticky issues through here. What is reality? Can I have a copy? How often nowadays when you see a picture on the net somewhere of something amazing, your first response is, I bet someone photoshopped that. And how do you tell? There actually are some, if you have photoshopped yourself, there are some things you can do to tell to see if the backgrounds really match and so on. But it's harder and harder to figure out what's a real and original photo and what's been modified in some way. Likewise, you have legal and regulatory requirements to maintain certain information. Sarbanes-Oxley's legislation that passed away the Enron scandal. And the question is, what is an accurate database? If you aren't preserving everything you're supposed to preserve, or if even the data isn't quite to the level of granularity or accuracy that's supposed to be there, are there legal implications? 3D printers, which I think they've got to come, I should just call them replicators. Who knows what 3D printers are? Nifty little devices. I'm getting one day. I'm still sort of waiting for like 2 more generations if I live that long. But you start having issues. For example, there are, in some states, there are certain gun components that are banned. But there are people who have 3D printer models for those components, so people can print them out. So it hasn't been transported, it hasn't been sold, but they printed it. You're going to start having issues of, and this is a classic Star Trek issue, you know, if you do an absolute copy, bit level copy of the Mona Lisa, which is the original and which is the copy? This is going to be something more for your lifetime than mine, but it's coming there. Oh, the classic case, how much do you trust the readouts of your mobile devices? There was a great study about 30, maybe even 40 years ago when digital calculators were a new thing. Someone took just a fairly straightforward 4-function calculator and they put a modified circuit board in it so it would give wrong answers to certain sums. Then they gave this to people and gave them a list of math problems to solve and said, solve these using the calculator and then verify them by hand and tell us what the correct answer is. And for a number of those, the calculator gave the wrong answer and the people would come up with the right answer. And you know what the people did? They trusted the calculator. They said, well, this is the right answer, clearly. Now, I've been dealing with precision issues. I've had a class in numerical methods. So I barely trust any number that comes out of the computer. But that's a real issue. If you see a number there, your first inclination is, well, that must be accurate. Okay, technology factors. First, I mentioned Sundog, this game I did. You looked up the webpage. Sundog ran on an Apple II, which was a 1 megahertz 8-bit processor, 6502. The computer had 64K of memory. The floppy disk would only hold 140K, and Apple floppies only use one side, so we literally punched a hole in the side of the floppy disk so you could flip it over and use the other side. So our entire game, the operating system, and this was written under Apple Pascal, which is variant of UCSD Pascal. Pascal was bytecode like Java, except they called it P-code. The entire game, all the graphics, everything and so on, ran on a 64K machine and fit on a 240K floppy disk. With some duplication on both sides because we had to have the operating system on both sides just to fake the computer out. You know, that's a tiny corner of an icon on your screen these days. It is hard to appreciate. One of the reasons I love games, I was doing graphics. I wrote the graphics library from scratch for Sundog. You know what it looked like? Little colored dots moving across the screen within the outline of the starship. You know, I play games like Dishonored 2, and I just shake my head. I never get tired of the incredible nature of the graphics and of the real-world simulations and so on. Our simulation was based on color collision. Oh, you can't get past this wall because you're hitting a particular color pixel. You guys are going to keep seeing this. Every time, I've been listening for 40 years, people saying, you know what Moore's Law is? Roughly put, number of transistors in a given space will double every 18 to 24 months. For 40 years, I've had people saying, well, you know, we're running up against physics. Moore's Law really can't keep going. And then usually just about a year after that speed of article, someone says, oh, we have a new breakthrough. And that's literally what's just happened. About late 2015 into early 2016, there was a spate of, well, we really are finally running up against Moore's Law. And then just late last year, I think it was HP announced a new way of engraving and stacking transistors. It's basically a tenfold improvement over current etching methodologies. Old technologies die and yet leave legacy requirements. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, my observation is that to build a truly disruptive technology, because a lot of disruptive, quote-unquote, technologies fail. You know, how many of you have mini-disc players or HD DVD players? I'm naming actual devices that were shipped and never caught on. These 4 items, my observation, this is what you need to do in order to supplant. This is pretty much what happened with mobile computing, with smartphones and tablets. They offered a clearly superior solution to certain problems. You had standardization efforts. You could use them with your existing laptop, and eventually they can supplant them, which is a movement you see now with tablets. Now, that said, software rots. It does. And this is talked about, where is it? I think it's in one of the 4 books. But I knew it well before then. The longer, basically, when you're making modifications to a legacy system, an existing established system in production or application, you're trying to add new features. And as you add new features, you start making the code less maintainable. You often introduce instabilities. And you reach a point where you either have to keep maintaining backward compatibility. This has been Microsoft's struggle for a good 20 years. They keep trying to break free of their code base. There was just a big flap about someone claiming that Microsoft was dropping the command line utility from within Windows. And there was tremendous outrage because a lot of people depend upon it. They're saying, well, you'll have to switch to PowerShell. At least that's how it's being presented. And there's tremendous outrage, and to where Microsoft came out and said, no, all we're doing is changing what the default is on a particular menu under Windows 10, and you can change it back to command, and we have thousands of customers out there who absolutely rely upon command and how command works, and could not easily change over to PowerShell. You have governments trying to regulate technology, and it almost always goes bad because the nature of legislation is, oh, we're going to solve this problem and help people this way. And they almost never have a sufficient understanding of technology to do that. I had personal experience with this decades ago. State of California, back before the web, we had what were called computer bulletin boards, sort of like individual websites running on your home computer that people could dial up and do stuff with. And as always, there was an issue of people posting pirated software or leaving inflammatory statements and so on. And the state of California was going to pass a law holding the person operating the bulletin board responsible for what anyone said on it. And I, at my own expense, flew up to Sacramento to meet with the legislator who was in charge of it. I said, no, here's why you don't want to do this. This is why I had to change the law. If I hadn't bought that plane ticket, the law would have been put before the legislator as proposed and passed. Now, nowadays, you have people like Google and Apple and so on, Microsoft, who have lawyers and lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to try and protect this, but there's still a lot of stuff where law intersects with technology that cause problems. And finally, technology, as we've talked about some, technology entrenches itself. I wrote an article in Windows Magazine in 1996 called Windows Forever and Ever, which I predicted that 30 years hence, by the year 2025, Windows would still be dominant. Now, the implication there is on desktop devices. Windows really hasn't made a dent at all on mobile devices. And guess what? That's still true. Windows still has a 90% market share of desktop devices. Desktops are not going to go away in the next 8 years. Now, with anyone, stop and think. Do you think that, is your first instinct that iOS will still be around in the year 2050? The answer is maybe. It may be so entrenched. Android almost certainly will be. Technology tends to entrench itself. It entrenches, you have solutions, you have file formats. I deal all the time with, particularly, there are cases I work on where I have to resurrect stuff. Literally, sometimes resurrect programs. I've gone as far back as Turbo C, Turbo Pascal from the 90s. I've had to get stuff running again, get software running again. So keep in mind that stuff that you develop may be around 30 or 40 years from now. Or people may be swearing at you because they're trying to decode your proprietary file format and lacking the things to do it. I have this problem. There's a program called NoteMap that I used for years and years and years as an outliner, and it's gotten sold and redone a few times, and I can no longer activate, even with my license keys, the copies I have, which are legitimate A4 copies. So I'm having to go back now on one of my older computers where I have a version installed, and their file format is proprietary, so I'm having to go through and open up each instance of the old file and export it to a new format. So I have those preserved. So, lesson for all this, oops, now let's carry on. You're going into a maelstrom. It may not seem like it. A lot of your jobs will be pretty simple and straightforward. I hope to have my daughter in here. I have a daughter who graduated with his BS in computer science from the U a year before last, and has been working for Solution Reach up in Lehigh, which is sort of a web portal connecting patients with doctors and dentists. Seems to be a well-run company, successful and so on, but when I told her I was teaching this class, she was very interested in coming to basically giving you her, here's what I thought before I graduated, and here's what I learned in, basically 2 years of working at Solution Reach, what real-life software development is. Things are likely to get more chaotic. There are technologies that are coming into play. Things like quantum computing, things like nanotechnology, that are going to end up getting tied to information technology. And the trick is to recognize what you're getting into. The real hope I have is that you're going to keep the books that I ask you to read, and that you'll refer back to them often, and that you'll recognize when problems start to arise wherever you're working. And either take steps as best you can to fix the problem, or get out. One of the most important things I ever learned was at a seminar on software engineering. Actually, it was a conference on software engineering. Went to a particular seminar on affecting change within your organization. I wish I could remember the name of the speaker. I know he'd done a fair amount of writing and speaking on the subject. But he said something which hit me like a lightning bolt because of what I was doing at the time. And I've repeated it ever since. The only way you can change the organization that you're working in is to go in every day prepared to be fired. Because if you're not prepared to be fired, you're going to have to live with what they tell you to do, or within certain constraints. Now, that doesn't mean to be belligerent or whatever. And the advantage of, I've worked for 20 years as a consultant, the advantage of that is, yeah, I'm prepared to be fired. I've told clients some pretty direct and blunt things. I don't tell it, insultingly or whatever. It's like, look, this is where you're at, this is what's going to happen, this is what I've seen. You can either do this and fix it, or you're going to have these consequences. And I've had some clients that have accepted that and done it, and I've had clients who've accepted it and ignored it. And I've had clients who basically never brought me back again. So, put out your ideas. Joseph will help you with all that. Get your ideas out there, form into groups. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Have a great Martin Luther King Day. When we get to President's Day in February, there'll be a Monday instruction day on the Tuesday after, so we'll actually meet on the Tuesday after President's Day. That's already out on the webpage. I forget. I won't be on campus a lot. I work from home. I have a library of hundreds of texts and so on. somewhere here I have my business cards. Well, you've got my email and my phone number there. Feel free. Call me. And now, actually, let me back up a bit. Like most of you, if I get a phone number, particularly and not an 801 area code, it's not someone I know, I let it go to voicemail. Because sadly, cell phones, which used to be the last refuge from telemarketing calls, are succumbing to telemarketing calls now. So I will say, yes, you can feel free to call me, text me, or send me an email. Identify who you are. I hope to learn your names. I may actually come in 2 weeks with those little folding cards so you can write your name and put them in front of you. I would like to know all your names well before the class is ended. And I'd like to hear feedback as you go out in life. How many of you are graduating in April? Yeah. I'd like to hear feedback as you go out in life. Maybe come back and say, Bruce, this really didn't help. Or, oh, I'm so glad you told me this because this is exactly what I'm facing right now. I'm glad I have a heads up. Anyway, that's it. Class dismissed. See y'all in 2 weeks.
Normally then when the RV is way forward in the RV. No, it's like all the way forward. Yeah. Like not part of the way there and I was like, I'm not walking. I'm at 17. Yeah,